ready for the truth? Bring it on!
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Do you want the whole truth? I don't think you're ready.
Governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people.
It's Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth.
Welcome back. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, probably on AFR Talk. Great to be with you. Yeah, it's day in and day out. Washington has way too much to do with our lives. But that's what happens when you do pass a government program and force the American people to be a part of it. And the way you pass it, I think, really goes to the issue of how it was done and how deeply troubling that was. It's a bit of history, and I realize some folks are saying, well, why do we have to go back and learn about this? You don't have to. But it would be nice to get some perspective of why the American people have not gotten behind this ever. They've never embraced it in the way. But first, let's bring you a story about the exchanges today. MSNBC, yes, MSNBC anchor, she attempted, the anchor of MSNBC, Mara Shivacampo, and that's me, looking at a very long name, but that's her name. She actually tried to sign up for the exchanges, and we've caught some highlights here of her attempting to do this. She got to the second step about the personal information and had a glitch, if you will. Speaking of the first day of signing up for the individual exchanges because of the individual mandate. And mind you on this, that the Republicans did pass out of the House a measure that would delay the individual mandate for a year, just like the business mandate was delayed. That said, here is the MSNBC anchor. Roll it.
So now that I have an account, it's asking me about myself. So this is step 2, filling out personal information about me and my family before I get to the final step of choosing a plan. I keep getting this error page. It won't let me progress past it won't let me progress past verifying personal information. So I'm going to call the help number now and see what they have to say. So it just started ringing again, but I haven't reached a person yet. We're 15 minutes in now. I'm back to the recorded message. So it's 15 minutes into this. It's 15 minutes into this call now. This is the second call, so I've probably spent almost 20 minutes on the phone now. We started about 35 minutes ago, so at this point, I'm going to hang up and call it a day. If I were signing up for myself, this is where my patience would be exhausted.
Good report on that. But the reality for many, and granted, this is the first day of these exchanges going through, but as we talked about with Dr. Bosworth previous hour, we do see some very deep concerns about the IRS, the personal information, the way the information's accessed, and we also go and point back to our good friend Ben Johnson, U.S. Bureau Chief of LifeSite News, Ben Johnson, detailing the navigators, the people that were going to be in charge of directing this program, helping with the program when it came to signing up on the exchanges. So very troubling news, not comfortable with it, and even MSNBC is having a problem. Now we go to President Obama, 2004. Now you remember, this was a speech that was cited by Chris Christie in the past. This was a speech that ostensibly, could be pointed to as launching him into the upper echelon of the Democratic Party post-2004 after the presidential loss, because it was the next presidential election where he ran after saying he wouldn't. My only point is this speech is part of the reason he gained so much support. Here is Senator Obama, the Uniter, 2004 Democratic National Convention. Roll it.
Now, even as we speak, there are those who are preparing to divide us. The spin masters, the negative ad peddlers, who embrace the politics of anything goes. Well, I say to them tonight, there is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America. The pundits like to slice and dice our country into red states and blue states. Red states for Republicans, blue states for Democrats. But I've got news for them too. We worship an awesome God in the blue states, and we don't like federal agents poking around in our libraries in the red states. We coach Little League in the blue states, and yes, we've got some gay friends in the red states. There are patriots who opposed the war in Iraq, and there are patriots who supported the war in Iraq. We are one people, all of us pledging allegiance to the Stars and Stripes, all of us defending the United States of America.
Okay. He took out some of the hyphens. There are elements of Crane Durham, what I've said about being an American and not dividing and speaking to the American people. It was a great speech in that way that it captured the moments of uniting the American people. He was also putting in some of the spin himself, and that's going to be said for a speech. But is that the same man who became president? Well, let's see. I picked this up, I think, from Gary Bauer, who was on YouTube, just to give credit where credit's due, and some of the clips here. But here's the president as president. Is he a uniter or divider? You decide. Roll it.
We're not waiting for Congress.
And I refuse to take no for an answer.
I'm itching for a fight on a whole range of issues.
We're going to punish our enemies, and we're going to reward our friends.
They must have been founding members of the Flat Earth Society, with or without Congress.
And you see folks waving tea bags around.
It's tempting not to negotiate with hostage takers.
We don't mind the Republicans joining us. They can come for the ride, but they got to sit in back.
I understand the desire for a fight. I'm sympathetic to that.
We're going to punish our enemies, and we're going to reward our friends.
It's tempting not to negotiate with hostage takers.
Obviously, you say, Crane, you put those together. There's many more. He's injected himself into the Trayvon Martin case and doing so terribly irresponsibly. He also has gone and said, you didn't build that. So many times he is denigrated and attempted to really, he criticizes and denigrates one's accomplishments. And he also paints things into be it a racial box, an ethnic box, or a class box. So no, I don't believe he's speaking to all of America anymore. He hasn't. He is my president. President Obama is my president. He's president of the United States, and I pray for him. But only a miracle can make 2 + 2 = 5. That said, we go to the issue of Obamacare and how it was passed. Well, one of the ways it was passed, it was through accounting gimmicks. That's why it was 100% off in its cost estimate, its cost projection, and we saw that. And perhaps this is one of the reasons people are upset and digging in their heels today. Here is an exchange. You may have heard this before, but I think you don't mind hearing it again because it really details the dishonesty of how Obamacare was sold to the American people, or attempted to be sold to the American people. Here, John Shimkus speaks to the idea of double counting money, using it one place and using it another, and that would be in the sense of Medicare. And here, specifically, is Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius. Roll it.
There is an issue here on the budget because your own actuary has said you can't double count. You can't count 500. They're attacking Medicare on the CR when their bill, your law, cut $500 billion in Medicare. Then you're also using the same $500 billion to what? Say you're funding health care. Your own actuary says you can't do both. So my simple question, I have 26 seconds left. What's the $500 billion cuts for? Preserving Medicare or funding health care law? Which is it?
Sir, the Affordable Care Act is 12 years to the Medicare Trust Fund, according to every actuary, and the $500 billion represents a slowdown in the growth rate of Medicare over 10 years from what was projected at 8% to a growth rate
is it
of
Medicare? Is it using it to save Medicare, or are you using it to fund health care reform? Which one?
Both.
The gentleman. So you're double counting. I yield back my time.
And again, this is not an isolated incident, obviously, with the cost projection. There's also the use of explaining how the deficit's going down, that its fastest rate, yet it's still much larger than President Bush's highest deficit, and it will continue. In 2011, we had Jeff Sessions on the Finance Committee of the Senate speak to then OMB Director, Office of Management and Budget, about their budget, the 2011 budget that the president put forth. And he was trying to get his head around, as so many were, how you could add deficits every year but not add to the debt. And he called out then OMB Director Jack Lew, now Treasury Secretary Jack Lew, about this. Here is that part of that exchange. Roll it.
I don't disagree that we have to take on the debt and we have to pay down the debt and reduce the interest payments. And the only thing I take issue with...
Does this budget do it?
I think we get to the point where we stop...
Does it do it?
It gets us to the point where we stop adding to the problem with our new spending. And that's...
The debt goes up every year and the deficit is... the debt is increased, doubled over this period.
I just think that if we're going to have the kind of conversation we need to have to resolve this, we have to have it in a way where we respect each other, and I respect your position, Senator.
Well, I can't respect a position that suggests this budget reduces the debt. If you take that position, we're talking beyond each other. The Wall Street Journal said about this budget, it's detached from reality as who...
No, we stop adding to the debt with our new spending. We do have interest payments. We have to control those interest payments in the future. There's a down payment. We have to finish the job.
Well, forgive me, Mr. Chairman, but this is I don't think it's a matter of opinion. I believe Mr. Lew is flatly in error, and it cannot continue, and I hope the President and he never repeats that this budget balances at any point in the 10 years.
Speaking to the idea of paying down the interest and not counting it as adding to the debt, that's what Jack Lew was attempting to do, and Jeff Sessions, Senator Sessions, took him to task as the ranking member for the Republicans on the Senate Budget Committee. Now, why is that important? Well, that is just another demonstration on how numbers and the presentation of budgets, incidentally, it didn't get a single vote. It did not get a single vote. President Obama's budget did not get a single vote, not from Democrats, obviously not from Republicans. As my Latin teacher said to me in 8th grade, Durham, that's a goose egg in the old grade book. And it was a good goose egg. Now, that would be very bad, and there was punishment to follow, mind you. But the only punishment we get is our kids saddled with that debt. And really, when we talk about budgets and putting our names down and putting the record of votes down for budgets, the Senate finally got together and did something this year, but that was after 4 years of not doing something historically not heard of. And you also point to the fact that why this is being done is they can keep spending the money, keep the elevated spending levels. 24% coming in 2009, raising the spending 24%, and if you include the stimulus, 84%. The idea of budgeting from what you got last year, and if you didn't get your 10% increase and you got an 8% increase, calling it a cut. The idea of saying deficits are falling, or we've increased them at the lowest number ever since after jacking them up. Looking at the idea of government spending as a percentage of GDP, going to 25%, then dropping it back down to 22% or 22.5%, while historically we've been between 18 and 20%. It's games with numbers and where you're going with them. And the reason I bring this up is because I know that as we've heard this over the years, and we've been told that it's unpatriotic before the president comes in and takes off his $480 billion deficit, it's unpatriotic, yet $1 trillion plus deficits, what are they? And they add $5.5 trillion to the debt. This is not beating up on people. This is not about being personal. This is about the chief executive saying, here are the reasons to put me in office. Here are what I'm doing when I'm here. Well, granted, they've been reelected. That doesn't really matter to me because what I'm talking about is right and wrong, and I'm talking about the record. Now, they could have been reelected, which President Obama was reelected. But the very people that were elected that he's pointing to in the House were elected to do exactly what they are doing. And our founders, I know he's a constitutional lawyer, but he should read more of, Andrew C. McCarthy, but also Alexander Hamilton specifically, about why they put the purse strings to the closest to the people. They understood that. They understood that the money was everything. That if you controlled the purse strings, you really have a great deal of a check on the power of other branches of government. So no matter how much you try to marginalize what the House is, and specifically the House Republicans are doing, that was the design of what we have. And we see that in its exercise of the purse strings with Obamacare. Now, we go to, Joanne. No, I believe now we are going to, Joanne Watson. Joanne Watson is speaking to the issue of Detroit. And this is a councilwoman on the Detroit City Council. And here's what she has to say about, this is back in 2012. Hey, we voted for President Obama. It's his job to deliver the money back to Detroit. Roll it.
After the election of Jimmy Carter, the Honorable Coleman Young, he went to Washington, D.C. He came back home with some bacon. Right. I remember that. That's what you do. That's what you do. This is our people, in an overwhelming way, supported the re-election of this president, and there ought to be a quid pro quo, and you ought to exercise leadership on that. Of course, not just that, but why not?
But that's the frustration. $300 million did get back. The White House found some room for that, but it's a drop in the bucket overall. And a wonderful piece on Gateway Pundit a little while back on this. But I brought it in to talk about the numbers and the philosophy of government and what I will say that conservatives are upset about. It's the manipulation. It's the idea that somehow when you get to Washington and you have the Treasury, that it's your money to spread around and give around. And I realize Benjamin Franklin mentioned the fact that the Republic would be over when government started to figure this out. Also, the weakening, if you look at our religious people upholding the Constitution, you can have the Constitution, but as we've seen, it's been distorted tremendously, and it's been expanded beyond what it says, the implied meaning, and then you go to the incorporation doctrine, and it goes to a whole new level. But the point is this: we have a philosophy that government, it's free money, and they can give it to people, and that's okay. A note to each and everybody listening: that money inevitably has to be paid back. And we are going to pay that back in the form of less economic growth, which means less opportunity, the ability to borrow money, the ability to use our godly gifts. That's going to be a problem, big time, and it already is. And our children are going to have to pay it back. And if you want to look at what socialized medicine does and socialism does, look at Europe. You can. It's a canary in the coal mine, arguably, in some respect. But we look at what John Boehner said after the legislation passed of March of 2010, and he took great issue with the fact of how this bill became law. that is currently looking to be defunded. Roll it.
And look at how this bill was written. Can you say it was done openly? With transparency and accountability? Without backroom deals and struck behind closed doors? Hidden from the people? Have you read the bill? Have you read the reconciliation bill? Have you read the manager's amendment?
And the answer was Hades no to a number of those questions that he was asking. Now, for those of you looking at this and saying, why are the Republicans being so resistant and why are they going outside being so radical? Actually, the way this thing was passed, it wasn't passed in the way that America should pass a major piece of legislation, any piece of legislation, arguably. And that is convincing the American people, the hearts and minds, and winning those. And it was never about that. It was about the power, because the more they spoke about this, the less popular it got. And now we see the impact of this, and they say, well, it passed its law. Yes, it passed through bribes and parliamentary procedures. The idea of, hey, we will carve out an executive order to protect so money doesn't go to abortion, as the Hyde Amendment would tell us. But we know that executive order was called out to be not impactful in the sense of it was trumped by the law. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz actually pointed that out when Bart Stupak stood on. There was widespread opposition to this, and there continues to be. And yet you hear the president, after spending all this money, saying, hey, guess what? We've spent all this money. We need to spend more. We need the government to grow. We need the government to keep going. And the people that are trying to pull it back within the constitutional parameters and also address the one major aspect of the economy that's harming the economy are the villains. And constitutionally, it's their role. And they have offered legislation when it comes to the delay the individual mandate, just like they did for businesses. But they put that in there? No. Have the members of Congress not get the exemption and have to deal with it just like the American people have to deal with it? No. These are things that have been done. The president will come back and say, you don't want people to have health care. That's a ridiculous and asinine characterization of what we are talking about. We're not talking about people's access to health care and desire for people to have health care and health insurance. We're talking about how it is done. And what we have seen is it was corrupted from the start, and people have had enough. And people are standing up and using their legal rights to do so and making the case to the American people. Now, it's not about Republicans and Democrats. It's not about R's or D's, but it is about accountability and the record. I just laid it out for you. You can decide. Live with honor in your life, compassion in your heart, and remember to always, always keep the faith in Jesus Christ. AFR Talk.